Welcome back to the Libertopian Podcast. I'm your host, Chad Mitchell. I hope you're doing well. On this week's edition of the podcast, I thought it would be nice to actually just read an article that I recently wrote and posted at the libertopianblog.wordpress.com. Let's have a listen. The title of the article is, Don't We Need Government for Infrastructure? Critics of a free society will use the tiled expression in their debates quite frequently. It is a lack of logical reasoning which pushes them to this argument of effect. So what is so bad about the idea that government shouldn't be in the business of building infrastructure? In history class, we were always taught that without government programs, we wouldn't have had the Transcontinental Railroad or the interstate highway system. Is it because of this government propaganda in schools that you will find both conservatives and liberals supporting many times to varying degrees the need for government to build the roads? Of course, a class in free market economics and maybe even a class in logic and reasoning could allow students to see right through the propaganda the government indoctrination center is pumping into their poor little impressionable brains. I would like to tell a story of a man who did the unthinkable, a story of a man who acquired private capital to build his own railroad better, more efficient, and without the subsidies his larger competitors garnered from the government. This is the story of James J. Hill. James Hill was a Canadian-born entrepreneur who, after many years in businesses such as coal, steamboating, and even banking, did what would be considered unthinkable by today's liberals. Between 1883 and 1889, Hill built his railroads across Minnesota into Wisconsin and across North Dakota to Montana. Hill and his men worked in spite of all obstacles, including a presidential veto of a bill that would have allowed Hill legally to build through American Indian Territory. The law preventing Hill from laying track across Indian territories was later repealed under President Grover Cleveland, who, like Hill, was a bourbon Democrat. Hill later went on to turn his railroad into a transcontinental all the way to Seattle, Washington. Hill did all of this with private capital. What we want, Hill is quoted as saying, is the best possible line, shortest distance, lowest grades, and least curvature we can build. We do not care enough for the Rocky Mountains scenery to spend a large sum of money developing it. Hill got what he wanted, and in January of 1893, the Great Northern Railway, running from St. Paul, Minnesota to Seattle, Washington, a distance of more than 1,700 miles, was completed. The Great Northern was the first transcontinental built without public money and just a few land grants, and was one of the few transcontinental railroads not to go bankrupt. During the Panic of 1893, Hill did the unthinkable. In an effort to maintain his business, he lowered his shipping rates for farmers, while at the same time extending his own credit to his other businesses to ensure that they could continue to pay their workers. This is a prime example of how business truly works in a free market. It was the subsidized railroads that either went bankrupt or became robber barons. It was government intervention that lent itself to more government intervention that lent itself to more, and more government intervention. All of this was an effort to stop the monopolization that they created. It is also a great case study to debunk the idea that without government subsidization, private capital will not be there for new emerging technology or to develop infrastructure. This concludes our edition of the Libertopian Podcast. I look forward to talking with you guys further in the coming weeks.